Welcome to Storyteller's Corner. Let's listen to the story. My husband wrapped his arm around his assistant in the passenger seat, buckling her seatbelt in front of me. He said, "She gets carsick. Don't be so petty." I didn't argue. I quietly sold the car and the house, left him the divorce papers, and moved abroad to claim a $1 billion inheritance. After 222 missed calls, I said one sentence that left him speechless. On an autumn night, the city glittered with lights, but a chill crept deep into my bones. I sat in the car, my hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing as I watched the clock strike 11 p.m. Our family's driver had taken an unexpected leave because his wife was in labor, so I, the wife who had stepped back from her career for 7 years, was driving myself to pick up my husband after a client dinner. I was used to this, to the long nights of waiting, to the thick smell of bourbon on my husband's suit jacket when he came home. But perhaps that very familiarity was the slow-acting poison that had been killing my feelings without me even realizing it. As I pulled up to his company's headquarters, I could see my husband, Michael, waiting under the awning. He was wearing the navy Tom Ford suit I had pressed for him that morning, looking as sharp and handsome as ever. But he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a young woman, her petite frame showcased in a form-fitting pencil skirt, her soft curls resting on her shoulders. That was Jessica, the new intern he had mentioned a few times over dinner. I was about to get out to help, but my hand froze mid-air as I watched the scene unfold. Michael didn't open the back door as he usually did. Instead, he quickly walked around to the passenger side and opened the door with a strange, solicitous tenderness. Jessica smiled, a bright and slightly flirtatious grin, then slid into the seat that, for the past 7 years, I had considered mine alone. What made my heart clench wasn't her sitting there, but what my husband did next. He leaned into the car, pulled the seatbelt across her, and carefully clicked it into place. The space between them was so small that it felt as though their breaths were mingling under the pale yellow light of the lobby. I rolled down my window, keeping my expression as neutral as possible. Our eyes met. I expected Jessica to look startled, or at least embarrassed, to see me, but she didn't. Her eyes flashed with a sharp, knowing look before quickly morphing into a mask of feigned distress. She placed a hand on her chest, her voice sweet but grating. "Oh, Sarah, I'm so sorry. It's just a bad habit, hopping in the front. The thing is, my car sickness is really bad tonight. If I sit in the back, I'll get sick all over everything. Would you mind if I just sat here for the ride? I'd hate to make a mess in your beautiful car." Before I could say a word, Michael chimed in, his tone slightly sharp, as if he were afraid I would cause a scene. "She's not feeling well and gets carsick. Don't be so petty about a seat. Get out and sit in the back. I'll drive. Or if you want to drive, just let her stay here. It's better than having her get sick all over the car." His words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Petty. The word was so bitter. I looked at the man I had spent my youth loving and supporting, now defending another woman right in front of me. I didn't scream or argue. I just quietly opened my door and stepped out. The cold wind bit at my skin, but it was nothing compared to the chill in my heart. I opened the back door and slid into the dark corner. Michael got into the driver's seat, and Jessica remained comfortably in the front. She turned to Michael, giggling about some funny story from the office. The entire way home, they chatted animatedly, asking about each other's favorite movies, the latest HBO series, and what they'd had for lunch. They spoke as if they were the only two people in the car, and I, the legal wife, had become invisible, a silent ghost watching someone else's happiness unfold. I glanced at the rearview mirror and caught Michael's eyes on Jessica. They were sparkling with a tenderness and affection he hadn't shown me in a very long time. He used to look at me that way. He used to buckle my seatbelt, used to drive slowly because he was afraid I'd get carsick. Had time been so cruel, or had his heart simply grown cold? 7 years of marriage, and I thought I was the leading lady in his life. It turned out I was just a comfortable rest stop before he moved on to newer, more exciting adventures. I closed my eyes, forcing back the tears, and told myself to be strong. When we arrived at the garage, Michael rushed out to open the door for Jessica. I grabbed my own purse and walked into the house alone. The familiar space of our large suburban home suddenly felt foreign and suffocating. As I passed by the car on my way to the kitchen for a glass of water, a strange scent hit me. It wasn't the calming lavender essential oil I always kept in the car. It was a cloying, provocative sweetness. I recognized it immediately. Good Girl, the perfume in the flashy stiletto-heeled bottle. The scent Jessica was wearing. It clung to the leather seats, lingered in the air, completely overpowering my presence in that car. I opened the passenger door and looked closer at where she had sat. The seat was reclined at a deep angle, a position far too comfortable and private for someone just catching a ride. A single, long strand of chestnut brown hair was caught on the headrest. I picked it up, wrapping it around my finger. It felt like cold, hard evidence of his betrayal. No intern catching a ride with her boss would adjust the seat like a lounge chair. Unless this wasn't the first time she had sat there. The next morning, as I was making breakfast, Michael came downstairs with a packed suitcase. He avoided my eyes, adjusting his tie as he spoke. "Sarah, I have to fly to the Hamptons for 3 days. There's an issue with the new resort project that needs to be handled immediately. It's urgent. I have to leave right away." I set a plate of eggs on the table, my gaze unsettlingly calm. "So sudden? Do you need me to pack your stomach medication? You've been drinking a lot lately, and your stomach has been acting up." Michael waved his hand dismissively. "No, it's fine. I can take care of myself. You just take care of yourself here. Call me if you need anything." He quickly drank a glass of milk, grabbed his suitcase, and left without the goodbye kiss that had once been our routine. As the door closed, I didn't clean up the kitchen. I went straight to my home office, opened my laptop, and logged into our family's device management account. A year ago, for his birthday, I had given him the latest smartwatch. Michael was terrible with technology. He wore it as a piece of expensive jewelry, completely unaware that I had enabled the family location sharing feature for emergencies. Right now, the red dot on the map was moving, but not toward JFK Airport. I watched as the dot slowly made its way out of the city, stopping at a high-end luxury resort in the Hudson Valley. His urgent business trip to the Hamptons was less than 60 miles from our house. My heart tightened, but my mind told me I needed more proof. I picked up my burner phone and logged into a dummy account I'd created long ago to discreetly keep an eye on his company's employees. I went to Jessica's profile. Just as I'd suspected, she had just posted a new picture to her close friend's story. She had no idea that I was one of them, disguised as the online makeup boutique she frequently ordered from. The photo was a close-up of a man's hands, expertly peeling a lobster. On his wrist was a Patek Philippe watch with a leather strap, the anniversary gift I had special ordered from Switzerland for our 5th year of marriage. The caption was short but devastating. "He's cold to the rest of the world, but so gentle with me. Thank you for the surprise trip, my love." I dropped the phone onto the desk, feeling as if a giant piece of my chest had been carved out. There were no screams, no bitter tears. I sat there in the large, luxurious room, the silence gnawing at me. It turned out that my 7 years of kindness and sacrifice were worth less to him than a flirtatious glance from a young woman. He was willing to lie to his wife, abandon his family, and run off with his mistress, even letting her provoke me so openly. I took a deep breath and walked over to the corner where our family safe was hidden. I entered the combination, and the heavy steel door swung open. I took out all of it: the deed to the house, the car titles, the insurance policies, and the joint savings account statements. I couldn't just sit here and wait for the end. I couldn't let myself be played for a fool. I picked up my phone and dialed the private investigator I had quietly contacted last month. My voice was calm, almost chillingly so. "Hello, Mr. Davis? I want to proceed with a full valuation of all our shared assets. Yes, immediately. And please prepare the paperwork for a unilateral divorce." I wasn't going to cause a scene. I knew the most brutal revenge wasn't a public spectacle, but quietly severing ties and letting the betrayer suffer the consequences of his own choices. When love is dead, the only things worth protecting are your dignity and your assets. Michael came home in the early morning, looking haggard. The smell of alcohol had mostly faded, leaving behind a sour, unpleasant scent. He clutched his stomach, grimacing as he sank onto the living room sofa, complaining that his stomach was acting up again after the long trip. Looking at his pale face, my heart, though largely numb, still felt a pang of pity, a force of habit from 7 years of being his wife. I told myself this would be the last time I cared for him as a wife, the last act of marital duty before everything fell apart. I went to the kitchen at dawn, selecting the most tender cuts of chicken and simmering them with wild rice until the soup was rich and fragrant with thyme and parsley. It was his favorite meal whenever he was sick or under the weather, the one he always said only I could make right. I poured the soup into an insulated thermos, wrapped it in a towel to keep it warm, and drove to his office. The morning traffic was loud and chaotic, a stark contrast to the terrifying silence in my heart. When I reached the lobby, the receptionist gave me a look of pity and hesitated, as if she wanted to stop me but didn't dare. I didn't call ahead. I walked straight to the CEO's office. The heavy mahogany door was closed. As I raised my hand to knock, I heard a girlish giggle from inside. The sound, muffled through the door, was jarring. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The scene before me made my blood run cold. The thermos nearly slipped from my hands. Jessica was sitting snugly on Michael's lap, her arms wrapped around his neck. She was pouting, holding up her delicate hand. "Look, Mikey," she cooed, her voice like cheap honey. "I got a little scratch opening that bottle of wine for you yesterday. It really hurts." Michael took her hand, gently blowing on a tiny scratch so small you could barely see it. He looked at her with a depth of concern he'd never shown me, not even when I was bedridden with a high fever. Seeing me, Jessica showed no fear. She didn't scramble to get up. Instead, she feigned a startled jump, accidentally knocking over a cup of hot coffee on the desk. The liquid splashed onto her hand, and she let out a piercing shriek. "Ah, it's so hot!" In reality, the coffee had likely cooled, but her performance was Oscar-worthy. Michael shot up like a spring. He didn't ask when I'd arrived or what I was holding. He shoved me aside to get to her, pushing me so hard I stumbled. The thermos of soup fell from my hands, crashing onto the marble floor. The metallic clang echoed through the room as the lid flew off, sending hot chicken soup splashing everywhere onto my heels, onto the hem of my dress. The comforting aroma of the soup now mixed with the overpowering perfume in the room, creating a nauseating combination. Michael spun around and yelled, his face red with fury. "What is wrong with you, Sarah? Are you insane?" I stood frozen in the puddle of soup, staring at the man I had shared a bed with, who was now glaring at me like I was his enemy. Before I could speak, he continued to shout, "Jessica is just an intern. She's delicate. Don't you dare bring your sick, jealous games here and harass my employees. Look what you did. You burned her." It was clear she had spilled the coffee on herself. It was clear he had pushed me. But in his eyes, I was the villain, the ugly, aging wife hurting his precious darling. Michael scooped Jessica up into his arms. She buried her face in his chest, peeking over his broad shoulder to give me a look of triumphant mockery. He rushed her out of the office to get medical attention for a tiny red mark that looked like a mosquito bite, leaving me standing alone amid the curious, whispering stares of employees peeking through the glass walls. No one dared to come in and help. They just pointed and gossiped about the failed wife. I didn't cry. My tears had run dry the night before. I bent down and picked up the dented thermos. Looking at the soup spilled on the floor, I thought it was just like our 7 years of marriage. Once spilled, it could never be gathered up again. I walked to the trash can in the corner and dropped the thermos inside. The dry clatter marked the end of my final shred of care and hope. I turned and walked away, my back straight and my head held high, even as my heart felt like a ravaged battlefield. 2 days after the incident at the office, I received a text from Jessica asking to meet. She chose a coffee shop in the lobby of their office building, a busy place, probably to show off or to ensure I wouldn't dare make a scene. I arrived on time, dressed in an elegant moss-green silk dress, my makeup subtle but sharp, radiating the quiet confidence of a mature, self-assured woman. In contrast, Jessica appeared in a pristine white dress, her makeup styled to look innocent, big eyes, pouty pink lips, the classic damsel in distress look that men so often fall for. She sat across from me, the feigned meekness gone. She crossed her arms, her eyes filled with an ambition and shamelessness that was nauseating. She pushed her orange juice aside. "Sarah," she began, her voice crisp and direct. "I think we're both smart women, so let's be blunt. Michael is tired of you. Look at yourself. You're old, stale, and all you know is the kitchen. How could you possibly understand the pressure he's under in the business world like I do?" I took a sip of my black coffee, the bitterness helping to clear my head. I gave her a faint smile. "You asked me here just to recite lines from a cheap soap opera? My time is valuable. Get to the point." Jessica smirked, looking smugly confident. "I want you to file for divorce. Stop making things difficult for Michael. It's pathetic to cling to a man who doesn't love you anymore. Name your price. How much will it take for you to give me the title of Mrs. CEO? $1 million? $2 million? I'll have Michael transfer it to you immediately. Consider it severance pay for your youth." I laughed out loud. My laughter was loud enough to make people at nearby tables turn and look. I set my cup down and looked directly into her eyes, my voice calm but powerful. "You think Michael has that much liquid cash? Sweetheart, you're either incredibly naive or pretending to be stupid. Everything Michael owns, the car you ride in, the house he lives in, his shares in the company, it's all marital property. And I'm the one holding all the legal documents and financial control. I decide how much money he has." I leaned forward, lowering my voice, but every word was like a razor. 10 million. My design contracts and investment returns over the past 7 years are worth 10 times the number you just threw out. Are you trying to use my husband's money to buy his wife's position from me? Do you have any idea that if we divorce now, Michael will walk away with nothing? He might even be saddled with massive debt for violating our prenuptial agreement. Would you still want that empty title then? Jessica's face paled, then flushed with anger. She never expected me to be so well-informed and so firm. Her confidence and delusions of power were stripped bare. Humiliated, she shot up from her seat, grabbing her glass of orange juice to throw at me. But I was ready. I was faster. I picked up my own glass of ice water and tossed it squarely in her face. The cold water ruined her thick makeup. Mascara streamed down her cheeks in black rivulets. She looked pathetic. As she shrieked, I stood up, grabbed my handbag, and said coldly, "Feeling refreshed? If you want to be the other woman, you should at least use your brain. Don't be the one who robs the house and then yells for the police. Next time you want to see me, bring a lawyer. Don't show up with that shameless face. I won't entertain it." I turned and walked away, leaving her stomping her feet and screaming in impotent rage amidst the whispers and stares of the crowd. Stepping out of the cafe, the bright afternoon sun beat down, but I didn't feel its heat. I just felt a little lighter. That weekend, my mother-in-law, Eleanor, called early in the morning. Her booming voice demanded that Michael and I come to the family home for Thanksgiving. She stressed that it was a major family reunion, with all the relatives attending, and that our absence was not an option. I agreed, my heart heavy, knowing I was about to endure another performance of a happy family. I turned to Michael, but he was glued to his phone, a smirk on his face as his thumbs flew across the screen. When I mentioned the trip, he scowled. "You go alone," he said, clearly annoyed. "The company has a surprise emergency shareholders meeting today. It's critical. I can't miss it. Just tell Mom I'm busy making money for the family, not out having fun." I knew he was lying. There was no shareholders meeting on a Sunday before a holiday, only a date with his mistress. But I didn't call him out. I just nodded silently, changed my clothes, and drove to their Connecticut estate alone. The ancestral home was grand and imposing. The long driveway was already packed with cars. My mother-in-law, dressed in a crimson velvet dress and a string of pearls, was busy directing the catering staff. When she saw me arrive by myself, the smile vanished from her face. She pulled me into a corner, her voice sharp. "Where is Michael? Why are you here alone?" "All of his aunts and uncles are here." "What am I supposed to tell them?" "You're embarrassing me." I calmly placed the fruit basket I'd brought on a table and looked her in the eye. My voice was soft but carried a hidden weight. "He said he had an urgent meeting. Mom, but I think he might be busy with something more important." I took out my phone and showed her the photo Jessica had posted just 15 minutes earlier. In the picture, Michael was laden with shopping bags from designer stores, grinning beside Jessica at a bustling luxury mall. Her caption was a pointed jab. Spoiled by my man who buys me the whole world. Eleanor stared at the screen, her expression shifting from shock to anger, and finally to a perplexing resignation. I thought she would call her son and chew him out, or at least show me some sympathy. But she handed the phone back to me, sighed, and delivered her verdict. "Oh, please, all men have their flings. He works hard. It's normal for him to want a little fun to blow off steam. As a wife, you have to be patient. You need to learn to turn a blind eye to keep the peace at home. Don't air your dirty laundry in public. When you shame him, you shame us all." Her words were like salt in my wounds. So, her son's affair was just blowing off steam, and my pain was just a petty issue I needed to hide? She blindly defended her son, completely disregarding my feelings. I looked at the woman I had respectfully called Mom for 7 years, and she seemed like a cruel stranger. I didn't argue. I just gave a bitter smile, one filled with contempt and disappointment. Throughout the dinner, I sat in silence. I listened to the relatives praise each other, listened to my mother-in-law boast about her son's success and her daughter-in-law's devotion. Every compliment felt like a needle in my ear. I stared at the feast before me, but my mouth was bitter, and I couldn't swallow a bite. I realized that any respect or affection I had left for this family had vanished with Eleanor's lecture on patience. I forced down a few bites, then excused myself, claiming I wasn't feeling well, leaving behind the loud, cheerful facade of a family I no longer belonged to. In October, Michael's company organized a corporate retreat and team-building event at a high-end resort with the largest golf course on the East Coast. As the CEO's wife, I was naturally on the guest list. The ridiculous part was that Jessica was also there, under the title of Special Assistant. Everyone in the group was aware of the love triangle. I could feel their curious and pitying glances. I ignored them all, maintaining a serene expression, playing the part of the magnanimous, clueless wife. That afternoon, the weather was beautiful. Michael excitedly invited everyone to the golf course. He looked young and energetic in his designer sportswear. Jessica, in a short, pleated white skirt and a tight-fitting polo shirt, clung to his side, begging him to teach her how to play. In front of all his employees, Michael wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, his hands covering hers on the golf club, as he whispered instructions in her ear. They were openly affectionate, as if I didn't exist, as if morality was an unnecessary luxury. When it was time to move to the next hole, we had to take a golf cart. The cart was a small 4-seater. Michael drove, and Jessica insisted on sitting in the passenger seat next to him. I quietly sat in the back with a young, flustered-looking employee. The path on the golf course was winding, with some steep, slippery slopes from the previous night's rain. As we were going down a long hill, Michael, distracted by his conversation with Jessica, wasn't paying attention to the path. Suddenly, a squirrel darted out in front of the cart. Michael jerked the wheel. The cart swerved violently, its wheels skidding on the wet grass. It lost control, careening toward a large decorative boulder on the edge of a water hazard. "Watch out!" I screamed, gripping the frame. In that life-or-death moment, time seemed to stand still. I saw my husband's reaction with perfect clarity. On pure instinct, he let go of the steering wheel, but not to brace himself or regain control. He lunged to his right, using his entire body as a shield to protect Jessica, pulling her into a tight embrace just before the impact. There was a deafening crash as the cart slammed into the boulder and flipped onto its side. With no one to shield me and no seatbelt in the back, I was thrown from the vehicle. My body flew through the air before hitting the ground hard, my head striking the sharp edge of the decorative rock. A searing pain shot through my skull, and warm blood streamed into my eyes, blurring my vision. I lay sprawled on the grass, my body aching as if every bone were broken. I struggled to open my eyes and look toward the overturned cart. Michael and Jessica were crawling out. Jessica had only a few minor scrapes. She was sobbing dramatically. Michael, though his own forehead was bleeding, paid no mind to his injury. He rushed to Jessica, frantically asking, "Are you okay? Does it hurt anywhere?" He swept her up into his arms and ran toward the clubhouse for help, his steps urgent and panicked. Not once did he look back, not a single glance in my direction, toward his wife, lying motionless in a pool of blood just a few feet away. The last thing I saw before darkness consumed me was the broad back of my husband shielding another woman while leaving me alone to face life and death. In that instant, my heart truly shattered, a pain 1,000 times worse than any physical wound. I woke up to a sterile white room and the overpowering smell of antiseptic, a scent that made one feel cold and lonely to the bone. A throbbing pain from the wound on my forehead made me grimace as I raised a hand to touch the thick gauze. I tried to remember what had happened. As the memory flooded back in slow motion, tears streamed down my face. The image of Michael clutching Jessica, leaving me to be thrown from the cart and hit my head, replayed in my mind like a recurring nightmare. The door creaked open, and a young nurse came in to change my IV drip. Seeing I was awake, she looked at me with pity. "You're awake," she said softly. "You've been unconscious for 3 days." Her next words twisted the knife in my heart. "But where's your husband? You've been here all alone since you were admitted. No one has come to visit or take care of you." 3 days. For 3 days I had been hovering between life and death. And in those 3 days, where was the husband I had loved so dearly? He was probably busy tending to the tiny scratches on his mistress's arm, busy comforting her after her traumatic experience, busy playing the hero. Meanwhile, I, his legal wife, lay here alone, my life in the hands of strangers. I managed a bitter smile and shook my head. "My husband, he's very busy with important work. Thank you for taking care of me." The nurse sighed and left without another word. I struggled out of bed and went to the bathroom. The woman in the mirror was haggard and pale. I gently peeled back the bandage to reveal a 3-inch gash running from my hairline almost to my eyebrow. The stitches were angry and red against my pale skin. The doctor had said the wound was deep and would undoubtedly leave a permanent scar. I touched the scar. It didn't hurt. I just felt a strange emptiness. This scar, I thought, was the final punctuation mark on our 7-year marriage. It was a permanent testament to the cruelty of a man's heart. I no longer felt anger, no longer wanted to scream for justice. When pain hits rock bottom, you become terrifyingly calm. I went back to bed and checked my phone. The screen was blank. Not a single missed call, not a single text from Michael. I discharged myself from the hospital. The billing clerk looked at me with surprise, a patient checking herself out, still with a bandaged head. I didn't care about the stairs anymore. The taxi dropped me off at our house. Every step was a struggle. The wound on my head still throbbed, and a dull ache in my abdomen from the fall made walking difficult. The house was silent. The housekeeper must have been out. As I walked into the living room, my eyes instinctively went to the main wall where my favorite large-scale oil painting used to hang. But the wall was bare. The lover's shadow was gone. It was a painting I had spent 3 months creating as a gift for Michael on our first anniversary. It depicted the back of a man standing in a field of sunflowers, strong, steady, and warm. The man I once believed would be my rock for life. In its place hung a cheap, generic landscape painting of gaudy mountains, the kind whose poor taste was immediately obvious. I ran to the storage room, ignoring the dust and cobwebs. In the darkest, dampest corner, I found my painting. It was tossed carelessly on the cold concrete floor. The solid oak frame was cracked, and the canvas was covered in dirt. My heart ached, as if I myself had been discarded in that forgotten corner. I remembered Jessica posting a photo of a feng shui painting she had bought to bring her boss good fortune. Michael had taken down our cherished memory to hang a cheap gift from his mistress. I used my sleeve to wipe the dust off the canvas, tears falling onto the vibrant colors. For 7 years, I had treasured every memory, while he treated them like trash. I stood up, carried the painting out, and called the director of a charity art auction I knew. My voice was hoarse but firm. "Hello, David. I have one more piece to submit for tonight's auction." "Yes, it's the lover's shadow." "The starting price?" "Whatever you think is fair." David hesitated. "Sarah, you once told me this piece was priceless, that you would never sell it. What changed?" I cut him off, my voice so cold it surprised even me. "What's the point of keeping the object when the person has changed? Let it go. Whatever it sells for can go to a good cause, better than letting it rot in a storage room." I hung up, gave the painting one last look, and handed it to the transport crew that had just arrived. As the truck pulled away, carrying my love with it, I turned back to the house. I looked at the tacky landscape on the wall and smirked. Michael, you wanted to erase me and replace me with her. Fine. I'll help you. I'll erase everything, so when you finally realize what you've lost, there will be nothing left. That evening, Michael came home earlier than usual. He walked into the bedroom, still in his work suit, the cloying mix of women's perfume and cigarette smoke clinging to him. When he saw me sitting on the bed with my head bandaged, he paused, a flicker of guilt in his eyes, quickly masked by his usual indifference. He came over and reached for my shoulder. "You're back," he said flatly. "How's the wound?" I was in a panic that day. Jessica was crying in pain, so I took her first. By the time I came back, they said you'd already been taken to the hospital. You know how I worry. She's just a delicate girl. I was afraid something serious might have happened. His clumsy, irresponsible explanation disgusted me. I leaned away from his touch. "I'm not dead, so you can drop the concerned husband act. This is just a scratch. It's nothing compared to the injuries of your precious mistress." Michael frowned. "There you go again with the jealousy. I've told you, Jessica and I are just colleagues. She's like a little sister to me. Stop overthinking things." He took off his jacket, tossed it on a chair, and climbed into bed next to me, trying to pull me into an embrace, either as a form of apology or simply to satisfy his own needs. The smell of his body mixed with Jessica's cheap perfume filled my nostrils. The memory of him shielding her during the accident rushed back, and my stomach churned. I pushed him away with all my strength. "Get off me," I said, my voice sharp. "Don't touch me. I'm tired. I want to rest." Shoved so unexpectedly, Michael was stunned. For 7 years, I had never refused him. No matter how tired or sick I was, I had always complied. This was the first time I had fought back so fiercely. His male pride flared. He sat up, scowling. "What's gotten into you? A husband can't even touch his own wife now? Or did that fall knock some sense out of you? Stop playing hard to get. God, you're always so moody. It's exhausting." He grabbed a pillow, threw it on the floor in frustration, and stormed into his office to sleep, slamming the door behind him. The sound of the door slamming was like a hammer shattering the last fragile pieces of my heart. I curled up on the vast, empty bed, silent tears soaking my pillow. I wasn't crying because he had yelled at me. I was crying for myself. The city's annual charity gala was held at a lavish 5-star hotel. Crystal chandeliers glittered, soft music filled the air, and expensive gowns rustled past in a haze of luxury perfume. I attended as a designer and as the wife of a prominent construction CEO. I chose a sleek, black velvet gown that highlighted my fair skin. I artfully concealed the scar on my forehead with a curl of my hair, but no amount of makeup could hide the pain in my heart. I had just taken my seat when Michael walked in. He wasn't alone, and he wasn't coming toward me. He was escorting Jessica, who was wearing a daring, low-cut red dress with a thigh-high slit. She clung to his arm, her eyes scanning the room as if to declare her victory. Michael showed no shame. He introduced her to his business partners as his special assistant, but the way his arm rested possessively on her waist told a different story. Their entrance drew stares and whispers. Some looked at me with pity, others looked excited for the drama. I sat perfectly still, sipping my red wine. He had dared to bring his mistress here, to publicly humiliate me in front of everyone. He had burned the last bridge. Jessica saw me. She pulled Michael past my table, raising her voice just enough for me to hear. "Darling, don't you think that black dress is so drab and depressing? It doesn't fit the festive mood at all." Michael glanced at me, his eyes cold, then smiled at Jessica. "Well, everyone has different taste. Let's go sit over there. It feels a little stuffy here." The auction began. Jewelry and antiques were sold one by one. Near the end of the night, the MC announced, "And now, for a very special item, an oil painting titled The Lover's Shadow." This piece was generously donated by the artist herself, renowned designer Sarah Miller, wife of CEO Michael Miller. The large screen on stage displayed the image of the painting. The man in the sunflower field looked vibrant and full of love. A murmur went through the crowd. I saw Michael freeze, the wine glass in his hand stopping midair. He stared at the screen, then shot a look of disbelief at me. He never imagined I would sell the one thing I had treasured, like my own life. Jessica leaned in and whispered something in his ear, then shot me a mocking smile. Her lips clearly formed the words, "Broke already?" I smiled back, a gentle but sharp smile. "Yes, I'm selling the past, selling my own foolishness." To me, that painting was no longer a priceless memory. It was just merchandise, and I wanted to see the price of betrayal. "The bidding for this beautiful painting will start at $5,000, the MC announced. The room buzzed, but my eyes were fixed on my husband's changing expression. All eyes in the ballroom shifted from the painting on the screen to Michael, the man in the painting, who now sat with a pale, strained face. The starting bid of $5,000 was immediately met. People were bidding not for the art, but for the gossip, to curry favor with Michael, or simply to own a piece of the drama. Michael sat frozen, his hand gripping his wine glass so tightly his knuckles turned white. Jessica whispered in his ear, her expression a mix of amusement and scorn. I could guess what she was saying, that I was intentionally humiliating him in front of his peers. As I predicted, when the bidding reached $20,000, Michael couldn't take it anymore. He raised his paddle, his voice tight with suppressed rage. $50,000. I'm buying back a memory." The room erupted in applause. Michael smirked, looking at me with defiance. He thought he could solve this with money, that he could salvage his honor and prove he still valued our marriage. But the show was just beginning. From a dim corner of the room, a calm, powerful voice called out, $100,000. Everyone turned. The man who had placed the bid sat in the shadows. All that was visible was his tall, imposing figure. It was David, a mysterious investor recently returned from abroad, whom I had contacted beforehand. Michael's jaw tightened. He glared at his rival, shocked that someone would dare to challenge him, especially with such a ridiculous bid. A man's ego, especially with his mistress watching, is a fragile thing. Michael gritted his teeth and raised his paddle again. $120,000. David was unfazed. $200,000. The crowd began to whisper. Jessica tugged at Michael's arm. "Honey, stop. It's too much money. We can buy something else." But Michael was already caught up in the heat of the moment. This was no longer about a painting. It was about his bruised ego. He couldn't let another man own an image of him, especially one painted by his own wife. He shot to his feet. $300,000. David simply smiled. $400,000. Sweat beaded on Michael's forehead. But the sight of David's calm challenge and my indifferent silence drove him mad. He felt like the whole world was laughing at him. He took a deep breath and roared his final offer. $500,000. Beat that if you can. The room fell silent. Everyone waited for the mysterious bidder's response. But David simply gave a slight nod, conceding. The MC's gavel came down with a sharp crack. $500,000, sold to Mr. Michael Miller. The applause was deafening, but Michael collapsed into his chair, looking utterly drained. He had won, but it was a bitter, foolish victory. $500,000 to buy back something he himself had thrown into a dusty storage room. I looked at him, then at Jessica, whose face was sour with regret over the wasted money. So that was the price of our 7-year marriage, a steep price to pay for a man's foolish pride. After the auction, Michael cornered me in a quiet hallway. His face was flushed from alcohol and frustration. He stared at me, his voice a low hiss. "Are you happy now? You set me up, didn't you? You put the painting up for sale knowing I'd have to buy it back. You're more cunning than I thought, Sarah. Did you need the money that badly? You could have just asked. I would have given you some. You didn't have to make this pathetic scene." I leaned against the wall, calmly adjusting my hair to cover the scar. "You're overthinking it. I sold the painting because I was tired of looking at it. That shadow on the wall, it exhausted me. You didn't value it, so I let someone else have a chance to. You're the one who chose to pay $500,000 for it. No one forced you." Michael was speechless. I continued, my voice devoid of emotion. Anyway, that doesn't matter. I need to tell you something. I'm going to Berlin next week for work. The partnership project with our German counterparts needs on-site supervision. I'll probably be gone for 3 months, maybe longer. At the mention of Berlin, Michael's eyes lit up. His anger vanished, replaced by a poorly concealed relief. 3 months away meant he would be free. No wife to monitor him, no more sneaking around. The house would become his and Jessica's private paradise. He cleared his throat, adopting a tone of fake concern. Well, work is important. You should go. Berlin is cold this time of year. Make sure you pack warm clothes. Don't worry about things here. I can manage. I'll have the housekeeper come by more often. I saw right through his pathetic act. He was already planning his months of freedom. He didn't know this was a one-way trip. I wasn't going on a business trip. I was going to find myself again. This lie was my last act of mercy, letting him live in his happy delusion before the storm hit. Thank you for your concern, I said with a half smile. I'll take care of myself. While I'm gone, do whatever you want. I won't be managing you anymore. Just take care of yourself. Don't let your work wear you out. He flinched at my emphasis on the word work and quickly turned away, mumbling about needing to greet some clients. I knew he was rushing to share the good news with Jessica. Watching his retreating back, I felt a sense of release. The final thread was cut. I was ready to fly. During my last days in the house, I methodically purged every memory. The spacious home that was once our pride and joy now felt cold and empty. I started in the bedroom, pulling out the matching shirts we wore on vacations. I didn't fold them. I took a pair of scissors and cut them to shreds. The sound of the fabric ripping was the only sound in the quiet house. Next were the photo albums. I flipped through pages of our smiling faces from when we were younger, poorer, but happier. I pulled out each photo and burned it in the fireplace. The smell of burning paper filled the air. I gathered every couple's item mugs, toothbrushes, small gifts, and threw them into black trash bags. I wanted to erase every trace of myself, so that when he brought someone new home, there would be nothing left to remind him of the wife named Sarah. When the last bag was tied, I stood in the living room. The wall where my painting once hung was now a blank, white space, just like the hole in my heart. The house was clean, and so was my soul. I was ready to leave. On my birthday, Michael surprised me by remembering. Perhaps it was guilt from the auction, or maybe he just wanted to play the part of a good husband one last time before I left. He came home early with a bouquet of red roses and a large cake that read, "Happy birthday, my love." He insisted on cooking me a steak dinner himself. We sat at the candlelit table. He raised his glass. "Happy birthday, Sarah. I know I've been distant lately. I promise I'll make it up to you." His promises were as cheap as his affair. I raised my glass and took a sip. "Thank you, Michael. The dinner is lovely." That was all I said. The meal was painfully awkward. His phone, which he'd placed face down on the table, kept vibrating. I knew it was Jessica. He grew more and more agitated, glancing at the phone, sweat beading on his forehead. As I expected, the phone buzzed incessantly, shattering the fragile peace. Michael glanced at me, then hesitantly picked it up. The screen lit up with the caller ID, "Work Emergency," a laughable code name. He silenced the call, but it rang again and again. On the 5th call, he couldn't stand it anymore. He shot up and went out to the balcony to answer it. Through the glass, I could hear him whispering, "I know, don't be scared." "Okay, I'm on my way." He came back in, his face a mask of feigned regret. "Sarah, I am so sorry. There's a power outage at the warehouse in Queens, and the fire alarm system is malfunctioning. I have to go deal with it right now. Please, go ahead and eat. I'll be back as soon as I can." I looked out the window at the stormy sky. A power outage, or was his mistress scared of the thunder? I put down my fork and looked him in the eye. "Go ahead. Work is important. I can blow out the candles by myself. I'm used to being alone, after all." His jaw tightened at my calm acceptance. He probably wanted me to throw a fit so he could storm out with a clear conscience. He gave me a quick, passionless kiss on the forehead, grabbed his keys, and fled. The door closed, leaving me alone. The candles on the cake melted, the red wax dripping like blood. So, on my birthday, my husband chose to comfort another woman who was afraid of the dark. I laughed, a single tear rolling down my cheek. I stood up and blew out the candles. The room plunged into darkness, but inside me, a new flame had just been lit, the flame of freedom. Go, Michael, and don't ever come back. Because when you walked out that door, we became strangers. Once the sound of Michael's car faded into the rain, I began to move. I left the dinner untouched on the table, a monument to our broken marriage. I went upstairs and pulled out the suitcase I had already packed. Inside were only a few simple outfits, my passport and essential documents. I sat at my vanity and slipped off the simple gold wedding band I had worn for 7 years. It left a pale, faint line on my finger. I placed the ring on the table next to the signed divorce papers. Beside them, I left a black credit card and a small note. The card contained the $500,000 from the painting auction, plus all of my personal savings. The note read, "Giving you back everything you wanted, the money for the painting, the ring, and your freedom. The pin is our wedding date. I hope you still remember it." I took one last look around the room, then pulled my suitcase and walked out, taking the stairs, not the elevator, savoring the finality of each step. The taxi I'd ordered was waiting. The driver looked at me, pulling a suitcase in the pouring rain. "Airport at this hour, ma'am?" "The storm's pretty bad." I smiled, the most genuine smile I'd had in years. "It's okay. The storm will pass. The important thing is to leave so I can find the sunshine." As the car sped away, leaving the cold, magnificent house behind, I took out my SIM card, snapped it in two, and tossed it out the window. From that moment on, the old Sarah, the patient, forgiving wife, was dead. I was on my way to the airport, to a new life waiting for me in Berlin. The next morning, after a passionate night with Jessica at her apartment, Michael was driving her to work. Distracted, he didn't see the construction truck in front of him slam on its brakes. He swerved instinctively to the left to avoid a rear-end collision, but there was oncoming traffic. In that split second, once again, his instinct to protect his mistress overrode his own survival. Instead of protecting the driver's side, he swerved sharply so that Jessica's side would be spared the worst of the impact. His side of the car slammed into the concrete median and was then hit from behind by a container truck. The car was mangled. The airbags deployed, but the windshield shattered, sending shards of glass into Michael. He was pinned in the crushed cabin, bleeding profusely. Jessica, on the passenger side, was saved by his maneuver and the car's safety features. She escaped with only minor cuts and bruises. When rescue crews pried them from the wreckage, Michael was unconscious, his body still angled as if to shield her. Jessica was hysterical. In her panic, she grabbed Michael's cracked phone from the floor and frantically dialed the only person she could think of to clean up this mess, me. She called again and again, but all she heard was the cold, automated voice. "The subscriber you have dialed is not available." I was already on another continent, far beyond the reach of their drama. I landed in Berlin on a windy afternoon. After settling into the apartment my new firm had arranged, I put a new SIM card in my phone to call my mother. As soon as I connected to the Wi-Fi, my phone exploded with notifications. The top story on my social media feed was a viral photo of a car crash. It was a picture of Michael, bloody and unconscious, still shielding Jessica. The caption read, "Real-life romance. Even facing death, he used his body to protect his love. This is true love." The post had thousands of likes and shares. People who didn't know the story were praising him as a hero. I laughed until tears streamed down my face. True love? But the truth couldn't stay hidden. Within hours, internet sleuths had identified them. An anonymous account, likely a company employee, posted the truth. "That's Michael Miller, CEO of Sterling Construction. He's married to the amazing designer Sarah Miller. The girl is his intern, Jessica. This isn't a romance, it's karma." The tide turned instantly. The praise turned to vicious condemnation. The scandal became the top trending topic of the day. The company's stock, already unstable, plummeted. I sat by the window, watching the first snowflakes of winter fall on the streets of Berlin, and scrolled through the chaos. I felt nothing, not satisfaction, not pain. It was like watching a tragic comedy about strangers. I turned off my phone, made myself a cup of hot tea, and found my peace. Michael regained consciousness after 20 hours. His throat was dry, and the first name he rasped was not his mistress's, but mine. Sarah. Water. A soft, trembling hand took his. Jessica was sobbing by his bedside. "Michael, you're awake. You scared me to death." He pulled his hand away weakly, his eyes scanning the empty hospital room. "Where is my wife?" he croaked. "Where is Sarah?" Jessica's face fell. She didn't come. I called her hundreds of times. She won't answer. I think she's angry, so she's abandoned you." A cold dread seized Michael. He knew I could be angry, but he never believed I would abandon him in a life-or-death situation. He demanded his phone and dialed my number, only to be met with the not available message. A terrifying silence. He was beginning to realize that something irreversible had happened. Against doctor's orders, Michael snuck out of the hospital and took a taxi home. The house was dark and cold. The living room was empty and dusty. He ran upstairs to the bedroom. The closets were empty of my clothes. The vanity was bare. On the nightstand, where I always left him a glass of water, sat a white envelope and a black credit card. Inside was the signed divorce decree and my short, handwritten letter. As he read the words, "When you read this, I will be far away. I'm returning everything to you. The house, your freedom, and the $500,000 you paid for your pride. Don't look for me. The wife named Sarah died the moment you chose to shield someone else." A guttural scream of pain tore from his throat. He smashed everything in the room, then collapsed to the floor, sobbing like a lost child, finally understanding the true cost of what he had lost. Michael became obsessed with finding me. He hired a private investigator, using the last of his money. Finally, they sent him a photo. A woman in a beige coat on a snowy street in Berlin. It was me. He sold his Patek Philippe watch and his last remaining car to buy a plane ticket. Doctors warned him that flying with his injuries could be fatal. "If I can't find her, I'm as good as dead anyway," he said. He landed in Berlin during a snowstorm, the bitter cold aggravating his wounds. He finally found the building where I worked and waited across the street, shivering. When I walked out at the end of the day, my face was glowing with a happiness he hadn't seen in years. But his heart stopped when he saw the man beside me, David, the man from the auction. David was holding an umbrella over me, and when I shivered, he gently wrapped his own scarf around my neck. I smiled up at him, a smile of warmth and trust. Michael stood frozen, watching the scene. He looked at his own reflection in a shop window, a haggard, broken man. He compared himself to the handsome, attentive man by my side. He knew he had no right to even stand near me anymore. He was my painful past. David was my bright future. Tears streamed down his face, freezing in the brutal cold. Rage and jealousy overrode reason. Michael stormed across the street, ignoring the traffic. He grabbed David by the collar. "Who the hell are you?" he roared. "Get your hands off my wife." His punch was weak and easily dodged. David pushed him, and Michael fell into the snow. "You're the bastard who bought the painting!" he screamed, trying to get up. "You conspired with her to ruin me." David pinned his arms behind his back. "Calm down, Mr. Miller," he said, his voice like ice. "You think I'm her lover? You're dead wrong. The reason I came after you and your company wasn't for Sarah. It was for my younger brother." Michael stared, bewildered. "Your sweet little Jessica," David sneered, "is a professional con artist. 2 years ago, she tricked my brother into a fake investment, bankrupted him, and drove him to suicide. I swore I would expose her. And you were just her next rich, stupid mark. I worked with Sarah because we had a common enemy, and because I respect her strength." Every word was a hammer blow. Michael stood trembling in the snow. It was all a lie. He had been a pawn in a much larger game. I stepped forward and threw a file at him. "Read it," I said, my voice steady. "This is the investigation report David and I compiled. That accident at the golf resort? It wasn't an accident. Jessica paid a technician to tamper with the cart's brakes and had someone release the squirrel at the perfect moment. She wanted to create a hero saves the damsel scenario to make you fall even harder and to get rid of me in the process. You didn't save her, Michael. You walked right into her trap. Michael frantically read the evidence, the text messages, the bank statements. He saw the truth. He had sacrificed his wife to protect the very person who was trying to kill her. He let out a horrifying scream that echoed through the Berlin night. He collapsed to his knees, clawing at his hair, the weight of his foolishness finally crushing him. The snow began to fall more gently. Michael crawled on his knees toward me. "Sarah," he sobbed, his voice broken. "I was wrong. God, I was so wrong. I'm a monster. Please, just give me one more chance. I've lost everything. I only have you. I'll do anything. We can go home. We can start over." I looked down at the man who had once been my whole world, and I felt nothing. The love, the hate, it was all gone, eroded by time and betrayal, leaving only cold ash. I took a step back. "Stand up, Michael. Who are you asking for forgiveness for? Yourself? My scar won't fade because you say you're sorry. The wounds in my heart won't heal. But I still love you," he wept. "I really do." I smiled, a sad, empty smile. You know, a marriage doesn't die because of a third person. It dies from 1,000 disappointments. When you chose to shield her and let me get hurt, the love I had for you died. I don't hate you anymore. To hate you would mean I still care. Now, you're just a stranger I used to know, and you don't need to ask a stranger for forgiveness. The word stranger was the final, fatal blow. He stared at me, his eyes wide with horror. My indifference was a punishment far crueler than any anger. He bowed his head in the snow, knowing he had lost me forever. I took out a fresh copy of the divorce papers and a pen. "Sign it, Michael. Free me, and free yourself. Keep what little dignity you have left." His hand shaking, he looked at me one last time, his eyes begging, but he saw only resolve. He signed his name, the scrawl of a broken man. The moment the pen lifted, I took the paper and put it in my purse. I turned without a word and walked to the car where David was waiting. He opened the door for me, and I slid into the warmth. As the car pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Michael was still kneeling in the snow, a lonely, pathetic figure being slowly covered by the falling flakes. He had lost everything, his family, his career, his wealth, and his love. It was the price he had to pay. I leaned my head against the window. I felt no sadness, no joy. Only a profound, quiet peace I hadn't known in 7 years. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew I wouldn't be alone. David reached over and gently took my hand. I closed my eyes and smiled. The storm was over. My life was just beginning. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next story.